You can begin the presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay. Are you ready?
I think so.
All right. Okay, so this is slipping away from the state, the privatization of American colleges and universities, and its impact on tuition costs. We went ahead and did the privatization of 4 different career paths. So the first one would be student health services. The second one is institutional research. The third one is academic advising. And then the fourth one is a broad topic of student affairs. So we'll start with student health services. Privatization defined, it's the movement away from public financing towards private financing. This means an increase in tuitions. Universities need funds for expenditures, and they must do this by increasing the tuition because of the lack of state funds. The next item is reducing the number of tenured teaching slots. So they're hiring more and more non-tenured faculty and adjunct instructors to save money. This is good for the university to keep the costs down, but bad for faculty looking for a career in academia. They're also undertaking aggressive outsourcing, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And then cutting services. Institutions will cut services that are the least valuable and ones that are using a lot of the financial resources. Other results of privatization include centralized decision-making, which is viewed as a positive for institutions as they have the autonomy to make decisions for their institution. Declining acceptance of academic norms. Institutions can choose their own unique ways of doing things. And then developing private funding sources, which must occur due to the lack of state funding. So an effect of privatization, some universities have chose to outsource their student health centers. Why? Because institutions can't afford to upgrade the current health centers that they have. In order to do this, they would have to increase student fees. One positive side to this would be it could decrease the cost of medical care for students. There are some concerns of outsourcing student health centers. Lack of quality of student, lack of quality for the student, such as the health education and outreach efforts. Health centers aren't just about the care. They provide prevention services, outreach, and the understanding of why students are ill. They focus on things such as alcohol and drug intervention, nutrition, sexual health, body image, etc. There's been some mixed outcomes of outsourcing efforts. Some have done really well connecting to a larger healthcare organizations, while others have failed miserably. Another concern would be the layoff for administration. Outsourcing means closing of university-run health centers, which would eliminate jobs for those employees. And these for-profit health systems are also concerning because they are trying to make money off of students because they're young and healthy, obviously. And then the decreased control from the university. The health center is being run by a larger health organization, which would lead to a decreased control from the university. That's all I got for myself.
Okay, so my area of focus was the privatization effects on institutional research. And so the main responsibilities of institutional research include collecting, analyzing, reporting, and storing data in regards to an institution's students, their faculty, their staff, curriculum, course offerings, and learning outcomes. At the core, and basically Custer labels the IR community as a group whose research focuses on the identity and practices of educational institutions. At the core of institutional research is a common set of reports and data sets that support them, including state and federal reporting such as IPEDS. And IPEDS is basically an integrated post-secondary education data system. And these types of data include institutional characteristics such as enrollment, completion rates, graduation rates, admission data, financial aid, human resource, and finance data. And some ways that institutions do report their data are through either annual surveys, internal reports such as audit reports or enrollment tracking, and also ad hoc requests. Ad hoc requests are basically detailed requests of information or data that one would like to obtain from a university. So for example, if I wanted to obtain data on enrollment numbers in a certain department in a certain academic year, I can request that data to be obtained. So, and also, the goal of iPads is to inform students and parents about the institution's data. The government does believe that all data should be made publicly available, and every college is required to submit data nationally, both private and public institutions. The only difference is on the public end, they must report more data than a private institution would. So, for example, a public institution must report their scholarship and fellowship data, whereas the private institution is not required to. And also, in order to assess institutional effectiveness, every college is a member of an accrediting board. And so the requirements of the accrediting board would vary from institution to institution based on which board they're a part of. And so if an institution were to become private, their compliance reporting would dramatically decrease. iPads and accrediting boards such as middle states would require less information, which allows more time for special projects and analysts. And so I had the opportunity to interview with Tara Mastroelli, who is the institutional research specialist at the College of Staten Island, which is a public institution. And she basically said that she does have to do a lot of compliance reporting, as CSI is a public institution, and if she didn't have to, she would have more time to do interesting work. So I thought that was, an interesting statement that she made. And as I stated, Tara is the institutional specialist, research specialist at the College of Staten Island. And the good thing about interviewing her was she had the opportunity to work for both public and private sectors, so I was able to get her insights on both ends, in public and private. While she was working in the private sector, she was able to facilitate surveys, analyze student test scores, make observations, and conduct interviews. However, she was only able to make recommendations according to the data provided. She didn't really have any control on what was actually being implemented, and that was an issue for her because she wanted to see her recommendations get carried out and not just the data that she was providing. She wanted to improve what was going on, but she felt like she was stuck where she was just providing this data and not really getting to the bottom of what the issues are at hand. So in the private sector, Tara was working on up to 10 projects at a time. She didn't get to see any follow through. She was, like I said, she was basically just conducting the research, and she knew it wasn't what she wanted to do in the long run, which was very helpful to me because it kind of gave me insight into, what each sector, pretty much would offer me. And so one of the things that I do like that she mentioned was that it was important to continue to ask questions on what is being implemented. And so she wasn't able to do that in the private sector. And although public institutions have greater reporting requirements, she still does prefer to work for the public. As an employee of the public institution, she's able to have more say as to what practices become implemented on a programmatic and institutional level versus working in a private sector where she would only be able to provide recommendations based off information obtained from the data collection. So I had a really great time interviewing her, and I think all of her insights were very helpful for me, especially if that's the career path that I'm leaning towards. And so I think I would probably be more on her end where I would prefer the public sector because I do want to provide the data, but I also want to be able to see what comes of the data as well. Okay, so that's all for my part.
All right, so I'm Devin, and my research was focused on how privatization affects academic advising. Public funding is going away and tuition costs are growing. These rising costs have an effect on how academic advising is done. So here's how. Privatization has a direct effect on tuition costs due to the decreasing amounts of public funding. So there's a shift away from public funding, which continues year after year. In the 1980s, college tuition paid by the student contributed to less than 25% of university operating expenses. These include teaching and administration. And currently, students cover close to 50%, and in some states, 85% of educational revenue. Two causes are state cuts and ever-increasing costs of expenses. So what happens is during recessions, states cut back on funding universities, but never fully restore it when the economy improves. This causes a steady and constant decrease in funding and need for universities to increase tuition. These increases directly affect students and their families in terms of how they make decisions about college choices and majors. So advisors, went too fast.
Oh,
Advisors adjust their process due to changes in student family expectations. And tuition increases can affect decisions about majors. So the way an academic advisor guides a student will be affected by increasing tuition. So for example, a family member and an academic advisor may dissuade a student from choosing an exotic or easy major, which are typically pathways to careers in sports or arts. They're majors which often are housed in their own schools and colleges and require a lower level of learning than math and science majors. They also rely on characteristics which have little to do with academics, such as style, looks, and personality, which are developed before arriving on campus. These majors are not always practical and may not yield good paying jobs, which is important to consider when facing large student debt upon graduating. Also, because of the increasing costs of tuition due to privatization, an academic advisor may discourage a student from changing majors. The reason being the extra costs one would incur from having to attend extra semesters due to a change in major. So in my conversation with Juliana Chazar, who's an academic advisor in the College of Liberal Arts at Penn State, she imagines that there will be a trend toward faculty advising in order to replace having to hire academic advisors. She says that outsourcing advising altogether is another possibility. Lastly, Dr. Chazar has colleagues who advise at for-profit universities, and they're dismayed by the fact that the focus of advising is on keeping the student enrolled, despite the best interest of the student, therefore advising to keep the student enrolled at any cost. And that's it for me.
My name is Kate Lewis, and I'm going to be discussing the effects of privatization on student choice and tuition cost. As the funding environment for higher education continues to evolve, we are seeing a shift in the public conversation about how college is funded. Currently, most states use a block funding style of funding for our institutions, where we receive federal funding from the state, or excuse me, from the federal government, and state funding from local state governments to fund these institutions. If we could pull up the next portion of the slide. Thank you. And what's effective about this style of block funding is it ensures that public institutions do receive a set amount of funds every year. And the cons of this are is that it can be inefficient, as Devin just mentioned in her previous slides. It tends to fund programs generally opposed to specifically where students maybe aren't focusing on careers or studies that will ultimately lead to positive long-term outcomes for them. As we move forward, though, the new public conversation is that we'll move towards a voucher system of using funding resources. If you just go back one step on the slide, I'm sorry.
all right.
Oh, it's not a problem. And in this style of funding, instead of the state or federal government directly funding the institution, it instead issues a voucher to a student that then can select the institution that they can go to. This has pros and cons as well. One of the foremost pros is that it gives students and families choices as to where they want to turn into funding, unlike the traditional block style funding. The cons is that it does leave susceptible to privatization, which has, as we've seen, tuition costs as state and federal funding goes down. So as we move forward, it's important to evaluate how the accountability and transparency of these different funding styles will impact higher education. As we see it now, it is kind of perceived that there's a low level of transparency as to where these federal and state funds are funding our institutions on a state, public, and private level, and a semi-private level, like, you know, our institution at Penn State. Next slide. And I think this has given rise to a lot of innovation in the higher education field. And I think it's really interesting that we've kind of in the past couple of years had these new massive open online courses come about. And I think it's a great example of innovation that has promoted student choice. And I think it will be interesting for student affairs to continue to explore this course option as it becomes more commonplace. And that is that students can enroll in a free open course. And they have the option to try to take these classes for college credit and pass a general examination that will provide credits for them. So just to conclude, our presentation discussed the subject of privatization in higher education as a whole, and specifically addressed its effects on student health care, institutional research, advising, and then student affairs and student choice. So if we'd like to move into questions.
Okay, very good. Wonderfully done.
Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Just a general comment, and then I'll ask Lee if she has any questions before I follow up. But I just thought, the presentation obviously very well researched and presented. You put a lot of time and effort into preparing for this, and the graphics were outstanding. The graphist, Intisar, if that was you. Did you use Prezi or PowerPoint?
No, PowerPoint. I just played with the animations a little bit.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And the other thing I thought you did that was effective was to put the picture of the person that you interviewed was helpful. Just to get a sense of, makes it a little bit more personal. And sometimes it brings the interview data a little bit more to life when you do that. So I thought that was effective. And Devin, I thought all the graphics of the advisors working with students really illustrates the importance of that function.
I wish I could take credit for it, but it was all Intisar.
It was a group effort.
Just a great idea. All the graphics and all the different presentations were good. And that does make a difference, particularly when you're presenting online. The graphics are important. The presentation is important as well. So I'll have a few specific questions, but Lee, do you have any general or any questions about any specific part of the presentation before I begin?
I need to unmute. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Gotcha. We can hear you now.
I was wondering if you found, you mentioned the privatization of student health services. Were there particular schools that have implemented this? And can you talk about some of them?
I know some that, okay. I know some that have had them and then taken them away. I think Boise State was one of them. That's one that failed. I want to say Kentucky, and then there was a Colorado, something in northern Colorado or something had it, and they all failed. I'm not sure of any successful ones because all the ones I looked at seem to be failures of it. But it says about 1/8 of universities are starting to do this. So.
Okay, interesting. That was my main question.
Okay, very good. Yeah, just a general comment. I thought it would be a challenge to take this theme and apply it to different functions, but you absolutely did it amazingly well. And sometimes it is, you're looking for a unifying theme, but you also want to look at a specific area that you have a particular interest in. And it's sometimes a challenge to make that work, but I always encourage students to go ahead and as I did with you, see if you can make that work, and you did it. You really pulled that off, I thought.
Yeah.
Kind of looking at the impact of privatization, on funding and student choice and the force at work there, and declining public funding. Kate, I thought you covered that well. And Lauren, there's nothing more critical, I think, than student health. And, particularly when you have outbreaks of things that happen on campus, and, it could be the mumps, which we've had at Penn State, or a salmonella outbreak, or, and if you're not staffed and you're relying on somebody else, at least in terms of administrators, you're very concerned about that if you don't have direct control or can staff up for that kind of epidemic crisis and things like that. So it's a very difficult thing. I think it might be a little bit easier for smaller institutions who are very close to a major health center in a metropolitan area, close to a major health center. But there's such a shortage, I think, of health professionals, and it's so costly for institutions. I know that's a dilemma. But I'm just wondering, which side did you come down on finally? If you were an administrator and you had to make this decision, do I privatize this and outsource it, or do I build that into our institutional budget and student fees?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes.
I think, what? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you would do as an administrator, having studied this.
I think it's probably more beneficial to add it into the student fees, to keep those sort of interventions, the preventions and the outreach and information like that. Because if you're outsourcing it to a different area, even, in a different part of the town, rather than right on your campus, then you're missing all of that sort of outreach efforts. So I feel like you're not benefiting the student by outsourcing it.
Boy, I agree with that. I'm glad you said that, because we could debate that for a while if you felt differently. I think one of the trends in student health is really more towards education, awareness, and prevention, and trying to give students, at that critical age of their development, some sense of healthy lifestyles and healthy relationships. And, we have the problems that we're experiencing with excessive alcohol abuse and sexual assault and all of the drug abuse, all those things. I just think, the institution needs to control that and manage it, develop a strategy and plan and staff it, and not outsource it. It gets to be too much. And I think every institution will be confronted with this. If you have a shortage of trained mental health professionals, then should certainly outsource that to the community mental health providers to deal with that overflow so that students get the support and services that they need. But I really feel strongly that's a core element of student affairs organization, and should be continued. So nicely done. And there are different variations on privatization, as you know and you highlighted in your presentation. And then, Intisar, you talked about institutional research, which is near and dear to my heart. I started out my career in higher ed about 30 years ago in the institutional research office. And I did a lot of numbers crunching and surveying and data collection, things like that. And I would argue that, some of those things could be outsourced and privatized, particularly in the age of data analytics and so much that you can learn just from student information systems and web traffic and things like that. So I think part of that, the boring part of institutional research, could be outsourced. And, as the individual that you interviewed said, you would free up more time, I think, to do studies. And public institutions, as you highlight, have more obligations for reporting to the state or state coordinating boards, crediting associations, and the like. It may free up more time to do specialized studies, which are more interesting and useful, provide more support to university administrators, and to do program evaluations, things like that. I think would make a lot of sense. So some balance, I think, between what you could outsource and get good data from and have people analyze that versus things that you might do in-house. But no, just a wonderful treatment. I hope you're thinking about, additional coursework in our institutional research series, because it's very good. And you'd be exposed to some of the leading IR leaders and professionals currently practicing that. So,
I personally, I love data. So for me, it was it's kind of a shoo-in, but then I also, in my role now, I do so many things. So I don't know if going into institutional research, being that that'll be my only focus, if that's something I want to have forever. But I definitely, at some point in my career, I do definitely want to focus on institutional research and see how, how I would like that professionally. But
Yeah. There's a good professional association, the AIR, and then there's a Northeast chapter of AIR too. I think it's called NEAIR. So sometimes if you go to one of their meetings or network with them, that will give you a good idea. But I think relative to your presentation, there may be elements where you could privatize that in terms of the data collection through the student information system. So you're not spending as much time with the data collection, and then you can spend more time on the analysis and interpretation and specialized studies that you would do as an institution. So no, wonderfully done and a great interview, I thought for you. So, and Devin, I think with academic advising, I'm wondering, even how that would work. It would be very difficult, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think to outsource that. Actually, the only thing I think ever works with outsourcing is food service. It would always do a better job than what the institution could do with hiring people to make that work. So, and they've made great money, Aramark and all these other places that we outsourced food service. But academic advising, I just feel like that's so central to understanding the academic program and the institutional culture, and then working closely with faculty. I might disagree a little bit with Juliana in that, faculty aren't good advisors, I would argue. Only at the graduate, I would say that they're not, only at the doctoral level, they end up really doing a good job advising doctoral students. But I would say even at the master's level, we're not really, really good at the nuts and bolts of advising. Maybe our program, I would say, Karen Paulson's one of the best, but he has a specific interest in students. But if you got, another one of our faculty who are doing a lot of research, they may not be a good advisor for students. So that pull away from, we can't afford staff advisors. I would say we could use even one for our master's program, just a full-time staff advisor who's trained in our program, maybe a graduate of our program, who could do that full-time, help with recruitment, go to.
I'll do it.
Yeah, there you go. There's your job description. That would work. So I would say, that is a good investment for higher education, and to outsource that would be a bad thing. Just like we wouldn't want to outsource recruitment, where they've done that. Well, let's say the for-profit institution, the admissions people were getting paid on a per-student basis. So they were actually recruiting people that probably shouldn't have chosen that institution. You know what I mean? And I always feel like admissions professionals, their job is to counsel, not to recruit, really, and not to accept students who won't be successful at our institutions. So, but I can see, as you looked at that trend, that because of the increase in cost, that does affect advising. Because we have, fewer public dollars coming, particularly for public institutions. Therefore, we have to raise tuition. That affects student choice of major and career and everything else. That's an unfortunate outcome, I think, where we become more career focused and less education focused. But I can see that happening. But I think a good academic advising unit and advisors can kind of balance that on an individual basis as they're advising students. So, but great treatment, wonderful narrative that went along with that, so students can see that very clearly in the slides as well. So I just wanted to wrap up. And Kim, welcome. I'm glad you were able to join us too.
Oh, yeah, I've been here for the whole thing.
I just didn't see you. All right, good.
It was wonderful. I just wanted to, if you don't mind, real quick on the academic advising.
Please.
Yes.
In New York State with this Excelsior scholarship program, advising is going to be a real issue, because for students who qualify for this Excelsior scholarship program, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the program, but the governor has implemented a program where students who attend a 2 or 4 year New York State schools starting this fall, they get free tuition. It's a last-in money though. So if they get New York State TAP, which is tuition assistance, or they get Pell, or they get any other grants or scholarships, that goes towards their tuition first. So, and then if there's any money left, any need after that, then Excelsior scholarship will take over. But students have to stay on track to graduate. If they go to a 2-year school, they have to stay on track to graduate in 2 years, or they have to stay on track to graduate in 4 years if they go to a 4-year school. My son's a perfect example. He went to a 2-year community college, New York State Community College. It took him 5 semesters. My son was on Dean's List the entire time he was at the school. It was an advising issue because of when courses were offered. His advisor wasn't aware of that. And so it was a timing issue for him. It wasn't an academic issue for him. So, I can see, privatization of advising, advising is going to be a real bugaboo, especially in New York State. So I just thought, I would throw that out there for anybody that's in New York State. For me, somebody who works at a private school, this Excelsior thing is has a little different edge, but, for the advising piece, it's really, it's going to be very dangerous for students who are not, paying real close attention, and they don't know enough to pay that close attention to advising and what their schedule needs to be and what the track is, and they don't know what's supposed to be offered and when. So that part really was very interesting for me to listen to and see. So and I just wanted to say I thought that the presentation and the graphics were phenomenal. Wow. Wow, great job.
Thank you.
All right, sorry. Maybe you want to think about graphics as your career path in marketing.
Well, actually, I do all the marketing for our department, so.
Oh yeah, with outreach, sure. Yeah, you're kind of a jack of all trades in that you do a little bit of everything. But I agree, Kim. Good point. I mean, I think that advising is so close to the institution. It'd be hard and dangerous maybe to rely on an outside organization to do that. But Devin, do you have any reaction or any follow-up comments?
Well, I think, like you're saying, it's so important to the institution, even at Penn State, from college to college and even department to department, it's treated differently. So you really, as an advisor, have to know the courses and be really invested in the students making the right choices and get to know them and spend time with them. And so it's difficult to imagine that happening if it was outsourced. I will say, when I spoke with Juliana and the research that I did and the reading that I did, this is something that's not likely and at least far off in the distance. So it's not around the corner for sure.
Yeah. Well, excellent treatment of this topic and theme, and a wonderful presentation. So let me just wrap up. I'll ask each of you to respond to this. I'm interested in how you felt about this assignment in terms of working collaboratively as a group. What worked well? It can be anything with regard to developing the project proposal or using technology. And what were some significant takeaways for you?
I'll start. Oh.
No, go ahead.
I can't even see you. Okay, there you are. Okay, I think the biggest thing for me was I was a little confused at first about how to tie in privatization towards student health services. So we sort of went back and forth on emails together. And then finally Intisar was like, well, why don't you just step away from that, trying to focus all of it on, on student health services, and take a different step back and look at how about you just do the privatization of this and, outsourcing student health services, and that's an effect of it. So it's like, oh, wow, throwing my ideas out there and how I wasn't really understanding what was going on. And then she threw that out there. So it's kind of like, we collaborated together and we all sort of figured out what we were going to do. I think Devin was sort of in that as well. Like, we were sort of confused of how to tie that all together, but it actually turned out to be a pretty good presentation at the end. So just working together, email seemed to work for us. And then we did a practice the other day on Zoom. So that seemed to help us prepare.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we did communicate via email for the biggest chunk of time, and then finally got together for our teleconferencing. We tried the phone conference one time, which I think is very difficult because everybody's kind of speaking at the same time. But once we did the video conference the other week or the other day, I felt that was really the best form of communication for us. Like if we did it again, knowing what I know now, I would say, let's just video conference from the start.
Yeah.
I mean, it really truly feels like you're together working. I know we all get so many emails every day, and just another email to go through and read and try to communicate that way, because we're all so busy. If an email's sent, then maybe it's answered much later. So this I felt was a great form of communication for this collaboration.
I agree. I think the video conference is by far the most effective way we've been able to communicate. I think initially when we did the phone conference, it might have been a good way to get our feet wet into the project, but long term, it wasn't the best way for us to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think when I first started and I knew that it was going to be a group project, I was like, how are we going to do a group project online?
Yeah.
I know Lauren said the same thing. She's like, we're all, but it ended up working out well. And I think what's interesting is that, like, I think initially we didn't know how privatization would affect each of our areas. But at the end of the day, in some way or form, it does, affect it. So areas in which people don't realize are going to be affected by certain things, it ended up that we each found an area where privatization would affect. And, so I did think it was interesting that we went along with it and continue with it, even though it was difficult to find, information on it. But I think everyone did a really good job on it pertaining to their area. So I think it was a challenge, but a good challenge, and I'm happy we did it.
I agree.
No, it's a challenge that you set out for yourself.
Yeah.
Struggled with it, Usually I have those challenges when a professor might raise a question that you need to answer and make a relationship that is difficult. But you posed that yourself, and then you met the challenge of helping each other out to see a path forward. So they're just very effectively done. And Intisar, I think everybody says that. You remember some group project that didn't go well in your prior academic work. It was a nightmare, disaster, and you end up never wanting to speak to the people that you worked with again because they either let you down or it was just problematic. But I've taught this course I think probably about 10 times now, and we haven't had one group that didn't have a positive experience or where the whole project fell apart. It hasn't happened once, and invariably people say what you said. You've enjoyed it, you met the challenge, you enjoyed kind of getting to know each other. And the reason we put it into the course, and you'll have it in other courses too, is that asynchronous learning is okay, but it's not the best form of learning. All right, so to the extent that we can blend in some synchronous opportunities like this, or you organize them yourself, that's even better, kind of self-directed synchronous sessions where you may debrief on this course or other courses you're taking. I think the learning is just much more powerful because then you begin to establish relationships with each other and engage in peer-to-peer learning. So that's our expectation, our hope at least, and that the relationships that you've established in this group would continue throughout the program, and you'll form other relationships as we do this as well. So beautifully done. It's been a pleasure to have each of you in this class. For me, I've enjoyed reading every word that you've written in the discussion boards and in your papers, your portfolios. You've met all the challenges, but this course is really designed to get you off to a good start so that you basic foundation work that you'll continue to build on, kind of scaffold up until you get to the capstone course, as Karen Paulson mentioned last week. And I just finished reading the capstone papers. I serve as the second reader for that course, and they're just amazing work. And I'm amazed at how students have developed through our program. So you have that to look forward to. You all have that ability to complete this program and to do amazing work in that final capstone course of official right. If you do research like you did in this project, you will have no problem at all succeeding throughout our various courses and through graduation. So thank you so much. Any wrap-up comments or questions for me?
Well, what other courses are you teaching for us, Professor Lomax?
Oh,
Yeah,
nice
I'm joining
them.
You can pick up a couple more.
I'm teaching the internship course in the summer, and then I'm retiring. I'm teaching this course again in the summer, and then I'm retiring. So to spend more time with my wonderful family, and my wife is retiring too. So
good for you.
Congratulations.
I will always be available to you. So if I can answer any questions or give you advice, you can always track me down. So I'll give you my personal email and contact information before we wrap up the course. But thank you for saying that. No,
Welcome. It's been great.
It's been, I've said this before. It's been very life-giving for me. You students have kept me going. So you should feel good about that. It's been very, very life-giving to have that to wake up to each day, to read your work and interact with you. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's awesome.
I always appreciate your feedback. I feel like it's helpful and it's like motivating. Like you're never.
So encouraging.
Yeah, very encouraging and motivating. So
I feel like the top student whenever I read the comments.
Oh, you all are. No,
hey, I thought that was just me.
Hey,
No, it's me.
I can assure you, not everybody gets that feedback. So, but I think that's part of my teaching technique. Those of you that will do teaching in the future, I just feel like what you're trying to do with students, and even if you're doing student affairs work, is affirming what you're really good at. Okay. So we all need that validation, and even you giving it to me tonight. So I thank you for that. But we all need that kind of affirmation and validation at times. So if faculty can perform that role, or if students can connect with a student affairs professional or an academic advisor, they just have to connect with somebody to establish that sense of belonging and develop a meaningful relationship. It doesn't have to be in the classroom even. If they develop some self-confidence, they'll continue to persist and be successful. So that's my approach, to try to catch you doing great work. And when I do catch you doing that, I try to give you that feedback and to believe in yourself. I mean, I think you're all gifted in different ways. So just believe in yourself and you'll be successful. And have an amazing career in higher ed. It's been very rewarding for me. So I can't think of more important work to be done, particularly as I look around the world. If we can just educate people better, certainly the world will be a better place, and we'll make better decisions, and we'll get along with each other better and understand each other better. So that's my soapbox for higher ed. But I really believe that, and I know you do too. Otherwise, you wouldn't have chosen this program and this career in higher ed. So I wish you all the best of luck, and please stay in touch with me. I want to hear how you're doing.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Okay, well, we
you so
better sign off before we get the next group backed up here.
Okay.
Thanks so much for allowing
Yeah.
me to spend time with you and record your presentation. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. And
Bye-bye.
I'll send this to you via email.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, how do I?